we'll start with Heretic, the new film starring Hugh Grant. Looked not that interesting, but also was getting really good reviews. So we checked it out. Todd, you're going to go first. Tell us all about Heretic and what you thought.
Heretic is directed by Scott Beck and Brian Woods, and it stars Sophie Thatcher and Chloe East, and they are sisters Barnes and Paxton. They wind up at the house of Mr. Reed, played by Hugh Grant, and under false pretenses, they're brought into his house and put in a game to test their psychological horror or something, and that questions their Mormon faith and gets crazier and crazier. And I knew nothing about this movie, basically. I think I saw the trailer once, if that, and so I was going in pretty much blind. And all I knew is that the writer-directors are the co-creators of A Quiet Place. And the opening act of this is really good, especially like the first couple scenes. Like Chloe East is like a really convincing but agonizingly strange actor. And like her demeanor in those first scenes was like something I really responded to for some reason. And they have this like conversation and really lulls you into what eventually is the plot, and it gets pretty shocking. The writing is pretty good. It's thought provoking, and it really wants you to let you know that it's being intellectual. Like they'll use visual cues. Like there's this whole like spiel about Monopoly and stuff, and it's spun in a way to basically to make a point, sort of like Bill talking about Superman or something like that. And it's not bad. It's just it feels a little bit too polished, especially for that point in the movie. It needed to be a little bit messier, and because it's not exactly a scary movie, for it to be a horror movie, it needed to be a little bit more chaotic. This at most it's eerie, but I think the sound design is what makes the movie experience what it is. Like the sound gives you an idea of space more than the actual visuals do, because you have no idea where you are in relation to anything else while the movie's going on. But the sound is what makes it effective. And the last half hour is pretty weird. I'm not really sure what to make of it. It when it gets really deep and tricky, it kind of cannibalizes itself, but it still sort of works. I would put it in the category of Barbarian in that way, where it takes some turns I didn't think was like a turn that it could take. But it's still pretty entertaining. I think it's enough for a slight recommendation. I'm at a low level 3 stars.
All right. Todd is at 3 stars on this one. Zach, where do you fall on Heretic?
Yeah, I'm mostly in agreement with what Todd said. Actually, a lot of his points were points that I was prepared to make. I love the shout out to Bill in Kill Bill Volume 2 and his Spider-Man or Superman soliloquy, because that is very much like if you like that energy at the end of Kill Bill Volume 2, you're going to love Hugh Grant in this movie. Okay, he is great at kind of mansplaining ideas, philosophies, the history of Monopoly, the history of what's the song for Creep, Radiohead music. Oh, yeah. He is a pop culture whiz. Maybe he likes Tarantino movies too. I don't know. Lots of ideas to share. And I agree with Todd that the opening is the most interesting part. And I also got to say, I love the comparison. I'm just kissing Todd's ass today. I like the comparison of my Barbarian. That's true. I actually hadn't even made that connection until you said it. It is a lot like Barbarian. You know that something's ominous beneath the surface, but it's interesting, and it's a high wire act about kind of one-upmanship of these characters. You know, he locks the doors. You know that something weird and metallic is in the walls, and you know that blueberry candle is going to blow out at some point. Second half, not as interesting. It fails to deliver in part because it's not very believable. Now, I think what the writers would say is, yeah, I mean, sure. Should we believe that a character has this elaborate of a setup in his house in Boulder, Colorado? I don't think so. Suspend disbelief, whatever. Okay, I had a hard time getting past that, mostly because I liked the conversation in the movie, and I didn't really need to have it turn into a horror fest. I didn't need to have body horror, and I didn't need to have people being resurrected from the dead. I don't know if we're getting too much into spoiler territory here, but the movie was, I guess, interesting as maybe a more cinematic TED Talk that questions people's belief systems. I also got to say, here's the one cinematic reference that Todd did not include. This has to be one of the most M. Night Shyamalan movies ever, not made by M. Night Shyamalan, okay? This is a total M. Night Shyamalan premise. You know, you get these two kind of naive, innocent characters that are at the house of this diabolical heathen heretic who's trying to convince them that their faith is misguided. And fundamentally, like a lot of the best Shyamalan movies, this is a movie about how ultimately faith perseveres. Now, my wife did not have that same interpretation of the end of the movie. She thought that the movie was actually advocating for more of a agnostic worldview, or a worldview that really questions the existence of the divine. But I thought that this movie kind of made it obvious that by the end of the movie, the lesson is that Chloe East's faith is what essentially is her salvation, what saves her. There's a line in the movie that Hugh Grant says about how basically religion all boils down to control. And it's mentioned at about maybe the 95-minute mark of the movie. And I kind of thought, do we need the previous 95 minutes of the movie to get there? I'm at 2.5 stars for this movie. I was not in the mood to see it. I also got to kind of say, I really didn't want to see Conclave because I'm really not attracted to movies that have thought-provoking religious, philosophical diatribes and conversations. And so I'm disappointed that this movie basically was what I feared Conclave would be, which, by the way, I still haven't seen nor am interested in seeing. I'm just not interested in this kind of shit. I like the history of Monopoly. Check out Mary Pollan's excellent book on the history of Monopoly if you want to know more about that legacy. But this movie, meh. But I will say, shout out to Chloe East, who was a young Steven Spielberg / Lorne Michaels' girlfriend in The Fabelmans. And basically, she plays some variation of Amy Adams in Doubt in this movie. And by the way, I thought also another kind of good 2007 recasting this movie would have been Anthony Hopkins. I mean, Hugh Grant is totally channeling an Anthony Hopkins early 2000s type role. But yes, I'm at 2.5 stars.
All right, Todd's at 3. Zach is at 2.5. And I did this in the completely wrong order. If we had done this properly, Todd should have gone last because I'm at 3.5 stars on this. I agree that I love the first part of this and the philosophical conversation and like, I mean, it's a horror movie, but you're getting this like it's like a battle of the minds too. And I love how Hugh Grant's character is like being challenged by these girls, like, oh, you actually can match me wit for wit a little bit here. And I think that is really cool. The second half, it devolves into something completely different, but I think it works because it continues the narrative and it continues the conversation in a very weird way that you just kind of got to sit back and go along for the ride on. And I loved it. So yeah, 3.5 from me. Now, these are the guys who wrote A Quiet Place, didn't direct it. John Krasinski directed it. The last thing they wrote and directed together was 65, which was the sci-fi Adam Driver movie about dinosaurs. So they're a little hit and miss. And it was worth going into with some trepidation, but no, this one's awesome. Hugh Grant is just continuing his streak of playing weird and rocking it, and I love it. And yeah, 3.5. This was a blast.
I could have seen that coming.
Yeah, probably. Well, and especially when Zach said it's a Shyamalan movie, I'm like, oh yeah, then that makes sense. I would like it more than the rest of you guys did. Now, one thing Adam texted me after, I'm assuming after he watched it, and he didn't tell me what he thought, but he said what he was asking was category placement of the three main characters. Like, are they 3 leads, or is it how would you?
I told him 3 leads when he texted me that too.
I said Hugh, probably the way it will go is Hugh Grant lead and the girls will be supporting. Like if like actual.
I think Sophie Thatcher is the only one you could argue is supporting. I think Chloe East is the main character, isn't she?
I would say for the first half of the movie, Sophie Thatcher's the lead though.
I like their opening conversation about condoms. That was a nice way to open the movie. I thought that was cool. In fact, I wish the movie had been more about conversations like that. I don't know.
Pornography watcher.
Exactly. Yeah. I am not going to remember this movie in 2 weeks. Like, I think it's fine. It's like passable, It's like, it thinks it's very clever, it does, bases itself in theories that it finds fascinating and it wants to be, intellectually provoking, it's going to make zero impact on me. I don't know. I like Hugh Grant is funny, I guess. He's charming, I guess. I don't know. This movie's annoying. I didn't like it. Thumbs down. Thumbs down. Didn't like it. Move on.
All right. Well,
I'm not telling you guys to move on. I didn't care for it. I know a lot of people do like it, but
well, so Zach's got 2.5, Todd's at 3, I'm at 3.5, and let's